In this video, I recall my experiences with the problem of addiction. I hope the details of the story will benefit other people with this problem. About 3 years ago, I was in a hospital for mental health problems. It was the first time, and I got very anxious at one point and asked for something to calm me down. I was given a benzodiazepine. Actually, the nurse called it a benzo. It calmed me, put me in a better mood, and made me sleepy. I loved it. After leaving the hospital, I found a doctor to continue prescribing them. He was very generous with them, and like a moron, I started abusing them and taking as many as he gave me faster than he told me to. At some point, I started drinking heavily as well. I realized for the first time that being really drunk was fun. I was extremely depressed about my life and the people in it at that point, so I was self-destructive. I wasn't working at the time, and my life became walking around a little during the day, coming home, getting drunk, and then taking a few benzos to sleep. Sometimes I'd keep taking pills and sleep for a couple of days at a time. It was a life. I didn't realize I was slipping into addiction until I woke one morning looking for a drink. I realized I drank everything in my home the night before and thought, well, the liquor store opens in 30 minutes. I know I can make it until then. I recognized that right away as addictive, alcoholic thinking, and I decided I better pull back. When I wasn't able to, I realized that I had developed a bigger problem than I thought. After a few more attempts to pull back on the alcohol, I moved and decided that I wouldn't go into the liquor store in the new neighborhood. It would be like not breaking the seal. But within a day or two, I was in the store buying alcohol. The promises I made to myself weren't on my mind at all. Around the same time, I noticed a problem with the benzos. The new benzo my doctor changed me to was stronger than the others that I had been prescribed. When I woke in the mornings, I wouldn't think about problems for a few minutes. It was like the problems didn't exist. But after a few minutes of that peace, it would all come back to me. It felt like I was being punched into reality. Also, I was counting pills 3 times a day. I had a weird feeling of being drenched, and my attempts to stop taking them always failed. I told my doctor that I was worried that I was getting addicted to the benzodiazepine. He shrugged his shoulders and said, "You probably are addicted, and what can you do if you're an addict?" He kept talking, but I was stunned and not listening. I told him I would stop taking it because I wasn't going to be addicted to a drug. He said that I couldn't just stop because I would wind up back in the hospital. So I kept taking it. I also told my mother I was getting addicted, and she said, "Just control it." I realized that was terrible advice. I decided to learn as much about the condition as I could. I read and watched anything I could get my hands on about addicts and addiction. I watched Dana Plato on Sally Jesse Raphael and read Basketball Diaries and Basketball Junkie. Then I happened to see a bio on Michael Landon that said he had no patience for the problem of addiction and no tolerance for the excuses that go with it. After hearing that, I acknowledged that taking the benzodiazepine because the doctor told me to was just a lousy excuse. The doctor wanted me on another medication, but when I realized that it was giving me more panic attacks, I stopped taking it. Panic attacks for me are sudden onset nightmares, moments of horror and fear that I can't get myself to come out of for a few minutes. And they happen without regard to the fact that I'm driving or that I'm in public and can't rip off my clothing, huddle, and scream. I realized that when I felt claustrophobic and scared in the hospital, it was because of that medication. So I refused to take it anymore, and I found another med. And now that I think about it, I should have stopped taking the benzodiazepines then as well. But I didn't. When I was ready to try again to stop taking the benzodiazepines, I remembered that a strategy I use for dieting is to write down my foods. Then adding butter to my bread gets annoying because I don't want to see it in my little book. I find it easier to say no for that reason. It works pretty well. So my rule for this was that I could take the benzodiazepine if I wanted to or needed to, whatever, but that I had to write it down. At that point, I noticed that my need for them had progressed. A few months earlier, I could go a week or so without one. But now, I couldn't go a day without one. When I tried, I didn't sleep. I was completely awake all night. Then I was so upset that I took one. Then I decided that sleep couldn't be my excuse either. So I started exercising for 45 minutes or so a day, and sometimes twice a day. That worked like a charm. I got to 3 or 4 days without a pill, and then up to 10 days twice. The third time I made it to day 10, I thought, if I take a pill, I'm going to have another day 2 and day 3. I knew they were agonizing, and that I didn't want to do that. I also realized that if I took one, I would keep taking them until I got the strength to try again. Again, a loss of control. So the third time I got to day 10, I put the pills in my garage so they'd be harder to get to, and I kept going. After 30 days, I felt ready to start throwing the pills away. I went to a store that had a garbage can outside and started throwing out the pills 2 at a time. It makes me laugh because I planned on throwing out 2 pills a day, but once I started, I just kept going until they were gone. When I'd thrown them all away, I had an instantaneous urge to reach in and get them back. Fortunately, I didn't. I just backed up and acknowledged that I had, in fact, flipped the switch of addiction. I couldn't handle that, and I did wind up back in the hospital for a few days. And there I heard that after 30 days, the physical addiction is gone, but you still have to work on the psychological issues. That made me feel better. At that point, I was still drinking, but less, and I didn't take any more pills. I came up with the idea that there are addiction gods, lesser gods than the Almighty, but still more powerful than any mortal. I decided that usually they were busy accepting sacrifices from all the other addicts of the world and weren't paying any attention to me, but that abusing my medication was like poking them with a stick, and they gave me their attention. I realized quickly that I'd gotten in way over my head. These gods want big sacrifices and are never satisfied. So I apologized for disturbing them and offered to never abuse substances again if they would let me go. And they did. I would meditate on the idea a lot during the days and nights after the initial 30-day success. Sometimes I would think, I don't do addiction, and then be so upset that the gods wouldn't like that arrogance. I would apologize again and thank them for letting me go. At some point, I was thinking about everything, and I thought, I don't do substance abuse. I was so happy. It was a step back on that terrible road, and something that I could promise to the gods and me. Then I was ready to try again with the alcohol. By then, I could go a few days without it, and I could enjoy TV and doing whatever at night without drinking. I would even laugh sometimes. But when I got upset, I'd go straight for alcohol. Then one night, I got agitated, and the only alcohol I had was a few miniature bottles of vodka and rum. I bought them long before and decided not to drink them. I thought if I got my life together and started traveling again, I could build a fun collection of them. But that night, I mixed them with vegetable juice and drank them. The next day, I went to buy a new bottle of alcohol and remembered that I wasn't supposed to drink the miniatures. So when I finished that new bottle of alcohol, I also made myself sick. That was about a year ago, and I haven't had a drink since. Hangovers didn't stop me from drinking, but poison made me feel awful and disgusting and mentally ill. I did enjoy sitting on my porch, drinking and listening to music as the sun went down, but I can do those things without alcohol. And I know if I get started with alcohol again and get out of control, I'll make myself sick. It's been a powerful deterrent. Sometimes I've had weak moments. Once I was planning to catch a bus to a mental hospital and sign myself in so I could get benzodiazapines in a prescription that day. It'd been a few months since I had one. But then I remembered that I don't take benzodiazepines, and that is not because I want to prove to anyone or myself that I am not an addict. I don't take them because I don't handle them well. So I calmed down and thought about what was wrong. I realized that seeing a group of cool young people hanging out upset me. As a kid, I thought that I would hang out like that when I was a teenager. When I was a mess in my teens and 20s, I had hopes for the woman I would become. But as a woman, seeing them, I realized that I never had that, and I would never have that, and I felt a rage. It amazes me that before I thought of all this, I thought of the pills. I wouldn't have had the thought or felt the pain if I had gotten them. I started playing guitar a little while ago, and I play every day. And I love looking at it and knowing that I can play. When I sent it to the shop for a few days, something upset me, and I felt like I needed to go buy alcohol. I realized that my guitar helps me stay well. After I got it back, it was a few more days before the urge to drink died down and went away. I experienced compulsions and obsessions as a young person. For a while, I loved a snack and would have a box of them every night. When I wanted to go on a diet, I realized that I could get rid of about 1,300 calories if I stopped eating them, so I told my mother not to buy them for me. By the end of the first night, I started to panic and whine, sheer panic. It was too late to go to the store. Fortunately, my mother had bought a few boxes and hid them from me in anticipation of a problem like this. She gave me a box and I ate the entire thing within an hour. That's just one example, but there have been plenty of others. Sometimes behaviors, people, shows, music. Compulsions feel awful, but dealing with them as a young person may have given me the confidence to know that the compulsive hold these substances had over me would go away if I stayed calm and didn't choose them. I'm proud of myself for getting through this, but I have to admit I am ashamed of one thing. I don't drive anymore, but when I was going through all of this, I was still driving. When dealing with a medical condition that could affect driving and cause danger to others, I shouldn't have had access to a car. I didn't know that the effects of an overdose don't necessarily go away with a night's sleep. Nothing terrible happened, but it feels like I was asking others to bet on me, and that's not okay. That's the story. Going through all of that revealed sad truths to me about life. Some people use addicts to do whatever for very little money. There are things I can't forgive. Hospital policy isn't going to stand in the way of an addict or a dealer bringing in and sharing drugs. Meetings are sometimes used to drum up new customers. Dealers approach aggressively if they think there's a chance of getting someone hooked, and they use the language of lovers and friends.